Hello, everyone. I'm excited to share I think, the highlight of my work in the last 10 years, working at the New School and Parsons School of Design, and really spearheading the development and leading the immersive storytelling course with 100 students. So as every story like this has a bit of an origin story, and the origin story is that just as things were happening around town when AWE was getting started and Ori was setting up the meetups, I was also working in the context of innovation and storytelling. That has always anchored my work, and really looking into the future. So kind of the three things about me, I refer to myself as a futurist storyteller or a narrative futurist, and I lead the Innovation Center in the XIR and Quantum Labs at the New School, and some of you recognize us as our largest school, Parsons School of Design in New York City. And I've been working with students, organizations, companies, studios, and think tanks around the context of immersive storytelling and ethics in particular. And I've been on the first wave at this movement in New York City, as I mentioned, or participating in the early sort of AR meetups, AWE meetups, meant like really almost like a rave party. You had to be on the list, and every so often you got an email, and the meetup was happening uptown or downtown or in Brooklyn, and 20 of us met and pondered on the future, and just to be here back in AWE is like being home. So, as I mentioned, this has definitely framed my work in the last 15 years. I've been thinking, making, really engaging with this domain for some time. In particular, I've been very interested in leading this conversation around creatives and the next generation of storytellers, designers, and thinkers. And I found my base in the Parsons School of Design. This is just a snapshot for those of you who haven't visited or not familiar. We're an urban campus right there on Fifth Avenue in Union Square. And we started as the X Reality Center about almost 8 years ago, and now our work is actually defined by the 3 labs, the XR lab, the AI lab, and the quantum lab. That's actually also a peek into our space, our innovation hub and public space, where we convene a number of different events, and as well as hackathons, design jams, and conferences. Okay, so and this is again like having you kind of see a moment of the work we do. In addition to that, I wear multiple hats, from quantum design jams to teaching immersive storytelling and mixed reality. As I mentioned, this course actually started back in 2016. In 2017, we hosted at the New School the Immersive Storytelling Symposium, which is a citywide event. That event was at the time anchored and pioneered by a colleague of mine, now a faculty emeritus, Anashka Sebak. This started the conversation for this course to be kind of born into existing shortly after, and that's why I mentioned we are the largest immersive storytelling course in the country with 100 students every semester. But the work my students do today, it's interesting, it was prototyped by the students almost more than 10 years ago in the space when I first got started, and I started with Google Glass and was doing a lot of video recording, was experimenting with the interface, voice and the limited voice and other options. But what you can see on the picture there is literally a student with a headset in 2010, pre any headset, pretty much pre-Google Glass, and they call it EVE, the Electronic Virtual Education. And interestingly enough, the students today, my students, are prototyping worlds for this headset. And so this is a journey that I've been involved in looking. And so as I've been looking into that, into this space, and particularly in the context of immersive storytelling and immersive experiences, I always felt for it, like this is just an explored geography of the mind. And in 2015, I was really interested in writing about that and seeing it as this coming space. And we have arrived in a very interesting already with headsets that are mobile, with headsets that we have 100 in our lab and can empower students. And so that has had a huge impact and also on the course, and the course has gone through several different iterations, major iteration across, starting with students experiencing virtual reality in our lab, to students making experiences in Mozilla hubs, to transitioning to Unity, and today actually leveraging generative AI as part of the co-creation in the course. So it has been several pivotal points, and one particular one that I will also mention in a few moments, but those are very specific ones. So I take these opportunities to think about that we're really at the moment of this, continue to be still at the early kind of moments of this movement, because if in the context of media, in the context of even moving images, that's very early, being 10, 15 years into having these headsets in our hands and our students' hands all together, which is really that moment. So I see that being on the cusp of something new. And I see us, coming, perhaps having witnessed that development, being at the door and pretty much keeping that door open to invite this next generation to cross over, to really explore these frontiers, and to step and create. And that is actually what my role is, that's what my job is, and that is what we try to do with the immersive storytelling course. Now, finding ourselves at the edge of this threshold. And so the way I teach the course is that I don't teach with answers. And for me, the most important part is actually to create the condition, the space for it, for the students to encounter it, to find out about it. And each semester starts with me really building a space where students are invited to step in, perhaps beyond what they know. It's very personal, it's very individual, but for most of them, it's very uncertain. And I invite them to come in and be part of the community, of something that we're starting together, and something that we are going to imagine together. And as we move to that, we kind of step into and start thinking of what embodied experiences mean, what it means to actually design for discovery, and we start thinking from the classical form of storytelling to the world building and story living. So, and this threshold for me it's not only a metaphor, but it's a moment and a series of moments that I particularly try to curate, and the course itself is a narrative for me. And that really means kind of really shifting this mindset of being able to be in a space without clear answers. And really also inviting the awe of experiencing for the first time, for many of them, about 60% of the students can still have very limited exposure, maybe like 1 or 2 times, maybe in a museum, maybe at a friend's, but pretty limited amount of actually time to think about it, and particularly to step away and think about it. And one of the early moments when students starts coming to me after week 1, 2, 3 is sort of when they come in and said, I've never been in class without set answers. We oftentimes enter in the classroom and there are lots of promises of learning what it is all about. And yet I'm inviting them to actually step into something that is in the making. And so this is why I define it as basically this being a threshold. And this is my practice, to open the door, to name the opportunities, to name the risks, and to walk with them until they realize that they're the ones that hold the key. So the way it happens is just more in terms of the format: 100 students, 4 TAs, I can't live without them. 15 weeks, 20 experiences. And this has been going since 2017. So we've accumulated, this is where we meet, this is kind of a more informal, casual moment in the classroom, ahead of class, but it is a formidable group of students. Those of you who teach 20, 25, you know how that feels when you have 100 in front of you, wide open, or with a dose of critique. It's also always exciting. These students also come, really, they are creatives. And I think this all AWE, in past AWEs, this content is always a conversation for us. And so these students come from the Parsons School of Design. They come from a variety of programs: communication, illustration, integrated design, fashion, strategic design, product design, management, design and management, photography, media studies, architecture, interior design. We have students coming from traditional liberal arts colleges, journalism, visual studies, but also creative writing and psychology. And then we have students from the performing arts, which actually creates the perfect playground, with all of these students bringing their talent, sharing their talent in the making of these 20 experiences. So this is kind of like a snapshot of the last 3 or 4 semesters of just to get a sense of what we create. And this is actually the last 2 semesters. And the last 2 semesters, I made a pivot. Which, as I mentioned, was pretty significant. Not only that generative AI has arrived, that means that it's open opportunity for co-creation, but in addition to that, I decided to really anchor these experiences for good, and ask our students to think about not just about creating the viral game, but actually creating something for impact. And so in a way to anchor that, I've selected as teams the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, we are not looking to propose solutions for them, as maybe some business or other courses tend to do. What we are actually trying to do is to share a narrative, highlight a condition, move people to action, really amplify and provide an opportunity to create a way of resonating and sharing a story. So each of those experiences could be on a system level, or could be very much on a personal level, where students zoom in or pan out and dive into both sort of system type of questions like climate change, or sort of environmental justice, or things like mental health, or even school gun shooting and others. So some very challenging topics, as well as into the future, into speculative future, with what it means to be a chef simulator in the future. And so these are some of the sort of a variety of different experiences. I'm going to highlight 4 experiences today to give you a sense and kind of dive in inside. But again, this idea of the practice, the way I lead into the course, and this particularly being creatives, and it's not anchors or tools, although as you would see, we use digital tools, we use augmented reality, we create augmented reality, and we use Unity, but it starts with a provocation. It really is, I begin with this provocation of really opening and expanding their creative boundaries, and reframing the classical storytelling, which I ask them to be familiar with, and we do a refresher. We have people coming into the course from a variety of backgrounds and experiences, but also really thinking through it, and being able to explore sort of beyond the genres. So we look into some of the the storytelling and different tradition from theater, from immersive theater to installation art, to architecture, and even urban planning, games, of course. So all these things are things that we very much explore in these spaces. We also start thinking about how we think about spatial design and emotional cues and various sensory feedback as we start to plan these kind of full body encounters. And we think through presence and embodiment and agency. And that leads us to sort of the other moment of interactivity and leading with both emotional and interactive cues, and driving these stories forward, focusing on the ethical mindset, and students explore in many of those experiences with care. They explore consent, they explore ethical relationships, they explore choices, representation, power. And that's something that I think is very important to do while you're starting, like when you as we talk about the next generation, because ethical mindset is very difficult to, as we see, actually bring about later in careers, and it's much more complex. And then we anchor that students are working in teams, just as in real life. It's a collaboration, usually of 4 to 5 students in teams. In addition, in more recent years, that co-creation, we've added another party into generative AI. So students have different sentiments about working with generative AI, and that is also part of the real conversation we are having in industry as this is becoming available to all of us. So, and finally, this idea that these projects, in the way we look at them, it's not really projects, but we look at them as portals. In being sort of intentionally designed, curated, emotionally curated, and also a moment of building them together, which is very important to creating this kind of team collaboration and navigating that throughout. So finally, our final moment is celebration. The course always ends with a festival, with Immersive Storytelling Festivals, which is a very important part for students to kind of celebrate, see each other's work, build on each other, and it's that moment that, for a lot of them, the experience gets anchored as they see their peers' work. So before we head into sort of the work of the students, and I already sort of anchored some of this is this idea that we're moving from storytelling to world building and certainly system design, thinking about presence, embodiment, and agency. During the way the course is also structured, which gives me a great opportunity, is that we do come together once a week in a more like, you can see it as this talk or similar talks with lots of video and other examples, very much oriented to showcasing work or presenting perspectives. And then they also meet in a working hands-on session where along teaching assistants, they're exploring, they're mapping, they're having mini workshops around augmented reality, around Unity, the Unity platform and such. And so they are collaborating and prototyping together. This is scaffolded across 15 weeks, with the first 6 weeks really anchoring this into more exploration of the art of storytelling, along with starting to play with augmented reality, which gives some of the students who have not worked in the spatial format an awareness of how things behave in space, so that as we transition in the fully immersive and virtual environments later in. So it's very much in building blocks as we move through the final 7 weeks, which are dedicated to developing the projects and working within Unity. For pretty much 85% or higher, this is the first time interaction with Unity for many of those students, and this is where the teaching assistants help quite a bit. We in this second sort of format during the week, in the workshop, hands-on session that is an opportunity for us to engage in small group and have sort of the workshop formats in getting students into Unity. So we are really thinking through kind of this narrative shift into multisensory interactive systems. We're not asking students to design linear stories, nor do I, but they have a pretty open canvas, and sometimes it is in the mix of genres that most interesting exploration happen. But certainly we are looking into that, just telling stories, but designing these worlds where we're inviting others to experience sometimes hard emotional or ethical choices and navigate through them. And that is also being very much emphasized and amplified by the choices we make, by the choices in bringing the Sustainable Development Goals, which, as I mentioned, are more of a thematic anchors in terms of tackling, in terms of bringing up this, selecting a story that can that can be very personal, and students can work with this and a scenario and create sort of a speculative future that take us back or take us forward or take us into different outcomes of what this could be. In particular, in the context of climate change, that is one way this works very well. So I now want to share some of the projects that students have worked on throughout the WAST, the WAST, actually, these particular projects come from the WAST 3 years. This is one of the first projects that emerged in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, a precursor from the more like the shift that we officially made the following semester. This particular project focuses on the pollination of bee. I'm going to actually play a short video, the beginning of a short video, in terms of seeing that work live.
Rising temperatures, droughts, forest fires. The effects of climate change are putting more pressure on agricultural production than ever before. The agricultural crisis makes many farmers depend on pesticides. However, these pesticides cause ripple effects. There is an international collapse of bee colonies, the exact pollinators farming depends on in the first place. The Life of Bees is an immersive VR experience in Unity that lets you experience the clashing needs of humans versus bees when it comes to industrial agriculture. Our story takes place early morning on a California almond farm. Here you will undergo an unexpected metamorphosis from a farmer into one of the bees that pollinates the almond flowers on the farm. Throughout the experience, you're faced with the dilemma of pesticides, once from the farmers and then from the bees' perspective. Our process began with an idea and looking for the right tools to bring our message across. We sourced assets from Unity, TurboSquid, Sketchfab, Mixamo, and we created our own assets in Maya, Blender, and Premiere Pro. Being thrown into the cold water as beginners, our scene started simple, but quickly built up over time. At version 17, we had reached the completion of our project, The Life of Bees. With particle systems, animations, atmospheric fog, lighting, terrain tools, perspective changes, audio design, and most importantly, a lot of interaction scripts. Now let's see what our experience is all about and start our journey to the California almond farm. It's early morning. You just arrived at your farm and get ready for the day inside your farmhouse. Let's turn on the radio and see what's on today. Good morning, farmers of California. It's time to talk about something that is essential to the success of your crops: pesticides. As you know, farming in California can be a challenging business. With pests and diseases threatening your crops at every turn, it's important to have the right tools to protect your livelihood.
In the interest of time, I'm going to move to some of the other projects, but you can see here sort of the experience of being a farmer, being in a California farm, but wait, what happens next is a metamorphosis. You become a bee, and you get to experience the chemical air and the pesticides impact. And so these are the kinds of story that we ask our students to consider, and being able to share, being able to use this new space, this immersive medium, and tell stories. So very quickly, another story I want to share, which is also a very sort of interesting story, which brings us in a post-human future, which is a polyspecies. Actually, the embodiment of a polyspecies storytelling, which I see that as we're seeing lots of these projects coming into festivals, and the students work on this in this world where a robot insect and a hybrid robot are actually coming together and exploring this world. And finally, and you can see some of the concept art that students have been working, some of the 3D modeling that they've been doing, and here, this all coming to life in Unity. The curator is another project which is kind of really ask you to ethically consider. You are a curator of your museum, and whether you are bringing in and making a decision on bringing art, or actually kind of being left to extinction. And so these are some cuts of this project. And finally, one very interesting and speculative project that emerged this last semester, the elevator of extinction, where the elevator in itself is a mechanism to navigate through the sustainable development goals. So these are some of the creative projects we've seen. Every so often, something completely new sparks out, and Seeds of Tomorrow was this project where students not only worked on an experience, but they were actually created a very specific controller. This was about a seagull and a very specific controller to navigate through this experience. So you can see here on this image, 3 different generations of students who have taken the course, students who are about to take the course, and now teaching assistants. And this is how you actually empower the next generation of storytellers, when you create the space for moments like this to happen. And I know we are at time, so I'm going to close by just saying this is the opportunity in bringing about what it is, whether it's an immersive space, immersive storytelling, immersive experiences, and immersive mediums, in not just looking at the technological developments, but really crossing that threshold in terms of what they mean to us as narratives, as stories, and so from storytelling to story living. Thank you. Wow.